This is just a quick Tuesday tip to show the advantage of using arrow functions in JavaScript classes as opposed to normal functions. I'm going to use a React app as an example for this. Arrow functions in classes have uses beyond React apps, but React makes for a good example as it's common to bind event handlers within a class when using React, and this is commonly when this problem occurs. So this app is just a button and a number, and when you click the button, the number increments. Simple. This is the code for the button here. The onClick is an in-place arrow function which calls this.increment function, which is up here. Increment in turn calls this.setState and updates the value for the number which gets displayed in the state. This all works fine until we decide that we don't want to define a function in the onClick, as the function gets recreated each time we render. So we remove the arrow function and just pass in this.increment without calling it. So now when we click the button, it doesn't work, and we actually get an error, cannot read property set state of undefined. As it turns out, within our increment function, the this variable is now undefined. So what's going on? The problem here is we're just assigning the increment function to onClick. Whenever you assign a function to a variable like this, or if you pass a function as an argument to another function, you remove the context from that function. Context is what sets the value of this in a function. Without the current object being the context, this.setState in the increment function won't work, as this will not be the current instance of the class. Before we were calling this.increment rather than assigning it, so it kept its context. One solution I've seen commonly employed to get around this is to bind the class functions within the constructor. So we would do this.increment equals this.increment.bind, passing in this. Bind creates a version of the function where the context is set to be whatever argument we pass in this case the current object instance. Now, although this does work, it's annoying to have to remember to add this for every function we may add to the class, which will be used as an event handler. Instead, we can just transform increment into an arrow function. So we just place an equals here. Then after the parenthesis, we put our arrow. Unlike normal functions, arrow functions always take their context from the current lexical scope, which in this case is the class definition, within which this is the current instance of the object, and that's exactly what we want it to be within the increment function. And when we use the arrow function, the increment button works as expected. So this was certainly nothing revolutionary, but every little helps in your path towards better code. If you didn't understand the concept of context and the this variable raised in today's video, you're really going to want to watch my next video where I clearly explain these concepts once and for all. That's coming later in the week.